weekly theme, August 17th through August 23rd for Cup of Cocoa and Chat. Rooted and reaching. Rooted and reaching. Sustaining what you've built. You don't have to keep rebuilding your life. Some seasons are about strengthening what is already growing, protecting your peace, deepening your roots, and using what you've gained to contribute forward. Okay? We want to protect, we want to deepen, we want to share it. Protect it, deepen it, share it, right? Episode number 57, Rooted and Reaching. How do you sustain the life that you're building? Okay? We're going to cover 3 major sections, which is protect it, deepen it, share it. Last week, we learned how to enjoy the life we built. This week, we will protect, deepen it, and share it, right? You've done the work. You created the systems. You've made room to actually live and enjoy your life. Now the question becomes, how do you sustain it? How do you sustain it? This episode isn't about adding another goal. It's about learning to protect what you've built, deepen what matters, and contribute from a place that doesn't leave you depleted. Okay? So, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Cup of Cocoa and Chat. I am your host, Princess, and as always, I am so glad you decided to pull up a chair, grab your favorite cup, and spend a little time with me. Now, last week, we talked about enjoying the space you created, right? Enjoying the space you created. We talked about being present. We talked about slowing down long enough to enjoy the life we're working so hard to build. And most importantly, we've talked about understanding that every open space in our lives doesn't have to be filled with another task, another goal, or another responsibility. So as I was thinking about where we go from there, another question came to mind, right? How do we sustain it? How do we sustain what we've worked so hard to build? Because it's one thing to create a life that feels good, right? It's another thing to build systems that support your life. And another thing to finally slow down and enjoy the life. But how do you protect it? How do you protect it? How do you keep growing without constantly uprooting yourself? Right? And once you've learned some things, experienced some things, and gained a little wisdom along the way, how do you use what you've gained to help somebody else? Right? To help somebody else without draining yourself in the process, right? Because we don't want to get caught up in that, right? And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Again, this week's theme is rooted and reaching, sustaining what you've built. And we're going to look at it through 3 simple ideas, which is protect it, deepen it, share it. protect it, deepen it, and share it. We're going to talk about protecting our peace, deepening our roots, and contributing forward, right? Because sustainability isn't just about keeping what you have, right? It's about becoming grounded enough that you can continue growing without losing yourself in the process. And here's something I want you to keep in mind throughout today's Cocoa conversation. You don't have to keep rebuilding your life just because you become accustomed to building, right? You don't have to keep rebuilding your life just because you've become accustomed to building. Sometimes the next level isn't about adding more, right? Sometimes it's about strengthening what is already there. Okay? So grab your cocoa or whatever you're sipping on today. You know, if you're in your car, if you're in the gym, wherever you are, and let's have this conversation. Because what we've built, we've made room to enjoy it. Now let's talk about how we sustain it. Okay? All right. So let's start with the first part of today's Cocoa conversation. Protect it. Protect it. And when I say protect it, right, I'm talking about protecting your peace. Protecting your peace. Now, peace comes in many forms, okay? And we'll get into that. Now, one form, we talked about boundaries. We've also talked about how to say no without putting a whole paragraph behind it, you know, having to explain why you said no. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time there today because we've talked about those things, right? When it comes to peace. I want to take this conversation somewhere else because protecting your peace isn't only about setting boundaries with people, right? Sometimes it's about being selective about what gets your attention, right? Because we live in a world where everything is competing for our attention, right? All the time. Our phones are going off. Somebody needs something. Somebody has a problem, right? There's something happening on social media. There's breaking news. There's family stuff. There's work stuff. There's somebody online arguing about something that has absolutely nothing to do with us. And before we know it, right, we become invested. We become invested. We become invested. And we have this saying, choose your battles wisely, right? Choose your battles wisely. I always tell Tyrone that. Choose your battles wisely, right? Now we all heard it. We've all heard that forever. Choose your battles wisely. Some people say different words, but it always have the same meaning, right? But do we actually do it? Like some of us do, some of us may not, right? Because every battle doesn't require you to fight, right? Every problem doesn't require you to solve it, right? Every emergency is not your emergency. And every problem is not yours to carry. It isn't. It's not yours. Sometimes protecting your peace means asking yourself, does this actually require my participation? Does this actually require my participation? Just because I know about something doesn't mean I have to become involved in it, right? Just because someone brings a problem to me doesn't mean I have to become involved in it. Just because someone brings you a problem, you don't have to engage all the time, right? And that's especially important when it comes to the people we love, right? Because we can care about people, we can listen, we can support them, we can encourage them, but we cannot continuously carry their emotional weight for them, right? Now, there's a difference between being there for somebody and absorbing everything they're going through until now you're stressed, right? You're anxious. You're carrying around something that didn't even belong to you in the first place, right? So know the difference between being there for someone and absorbing everything they're going through. Because sometimes you have to choose what you're willing to absorb. Now, protect your digital peace. Protect your digital peace. I have gone down a rabbit hole, and it's been a couple of years ago. But if you're watching or scrolling through TikTok, Facebook, or even Instagram, the trending topic for the last few weeks, right, have been Queen Op. Queen Op comes into our phones. She disappears, she comes, she goes, or whatever. And yesterday, I believe it was yesterday, I almost pulled out my phone and started a think piece myself because I was so invested. I was so invested. I was so invested, right? But everything ain't our fight, you know? So if you're somebody like me who spends a lot of their time on the internet, and I'm raising my own hand here, right? Then we have another kind of peace to protect, right? Our digital piece, right? Learn how to use that mute button. I'm telling you, it will work. Learn how to unfollow. Now, for me, I follow people, but I don't follow a lot of big creators, right? I don't follow them because they don't feel like they have to follow you back. And that's just not my vibe. I don't care that you don't follow me back, but it's that entitlement for me. And them thinking because you follow them, you have to support them in the way that they want you to support them. And that's not my vibe, right? So I don't follow a lot of people for that reason. But if you are following people and it is becoming too much, learn to unfollow. That button also works. Because you don't necessarily have to argue with somebody, announce your departure, or make a big production out of it. Just unfollow or mute them. Sometimes you can simply decide, I don't need this in front of me every day, and just keep moving, because that Queen Op situation was getting me so angry, and I don't know her. I don't know her, and it had nothing to do with me. And I was going to throw my opinion in the ring like everybody else, because I cannot judge her, right? None of us can judge her, right? And the things that she's going through are her things. I just was invested, and I feel for the innocent one, which is her child, her unborn child that she's carrying, and her child Summer. So I was invested. My God, I was invested. But I had to pull away. I had to keep moving, you know? So that's one of the things that you can do. Well, two of the things you can do to protect your digital peace. Mute, unfollow, right? You ain't got to be arguing and spitting on your phone with people that you don't know. Don't even worry about it, because your chances are you'll never meet them, right? Create some phone-free zones in your life, right? Maybe at dinner, put the phone down. Like make that a phone-free zone. At dinner, when you're spending time with your family, you know, maybe, when you're spending quality time with your family or friend, like the phone gets put away. Just put the phone away. Just put it away. Give the people sitting in front of you some of the attention that you so easily, right, give to the people inside our phone. And that's only for the people that are invested in a lot of the drama going on their phones, right? If that's not you, don't even worry about it. You protect your peace in other ways. Now, we got to talk about doom scrolling. Doom scrolling. A lot of you that are my Facebook friends or you follow me on Facebook, you know that I recap stories on Facebook, right? And I haven't did it much because it's depressing. It's depressing. And it was hard for me to find upbeat stories about the community, stories about people doing good things, right? It was so many things about our country, other countries, the person that's supposed to be in charge, right? It was so many things. Every time I would research the news feeds and stuff, all I was seeing was the person that's supposed to be the commander in chief. And a lot of the stories were based around his daily doings and the craziness and all the other stuff. So I didn't want to recap that. So, I'm still a recapper. It's just something I definitely had to pull away from. So doom scrolling, right? That's what I'm talking about now. You start out checking one news story and 45 minutes later, guess what? You've read about every terrible thing happening everywhere. Now you're upset. Now you're worried. Now you're angry. Now you're afraid. And none of that information helped you do anything productive about the situation. So what was the point, right? What was even the point? A lot of wasted time. So I'm not saying do not stay informed. Absolutely stay informed. However, check the news at certain times of the day, right? Don't have it to consume. Don't have you don't have to have bad news consume you from the moment you wake up until the moment you go to sleep. Because I know people that watch those news stations all day long. They don't watch TV, but they're watching the news constantly. CSNC, whatever the acronyms are for those stations. They're watching those stations every day, all day. And it's crazy. And it's crazy. So protect your mind, protect your attention, protect your peace. Come back to yourself, right? Now, sometimes protecting your peace is about doing some very ordinary things that bring you back into the present moment. Take a pause, take a short pause, straighten up your desk. Like, I try to keep my desk clutter free. Step outside for a few minutes. Step outside. Touch grass. um, Feel the sun. Get that vitamin D in and get that fresh air, right? Because sometimes we spend so much time inside our heads or inside our phones that we need something simple to remind us, I'm right here. I'm right here. This is my life and this is this moment that I should be present in, right? So I thought I was recording, y'all. I was recording on my device. Oh my God, for the clips. Um, so yeah, those little practices can help us ground our day because peace doesn't always require some big retreat, some vacation. Although we look forward to those things, that is not always the way to protect your peace, right? Sometimes peace looks like putting the phone down, putting it down, like getting rid of it. And all of the things, clearing your table, your desk, your table. You come in, you throw your mail on that table, and before you know it, you got a week's worth of mail. Those kind of things, right? Um, or just giving yourself 5 quiet minutes. 5 quiet minutes. Okay? Peace is everything, and it's worth protecting, right? It's worth protecting. You protect everything else. You protect your your banking institution, your information, all of those personal things to you, you protect. But learn to protect your peace as well, because it's definitely worth it. All right, so here's our first Coco conversation question. What am I allowing access to my life that keeps disturbing my peace? I work so hard to create. Now, remember, I asked this question last week as well, and I wanted to bring it back up because it's very important. What are you allowing access to in your life that keeps disturbing your peace when you've worked so hard to create it? Right? And I'll answer that one for myself. Because there was a time when I allowed numbers, believe it or not, to disturb my peace. And when I say numbers, I'm talking about my analytics. I would go live. For those of you that know, I used to go live every day at 6 a.m. with Cup of Cocoa. When Cup of Cocoa and chat first started, I used to go on Facebook Live, right? I went on the app called Favorite It, and that's where I started. And then I brought it over to Facebook Live. So I did it every day at 6 a.m. Every day at 6 a.m. And I watched my numbers, which was the wrong thing to do, but I watched my numbers. And when watching my numbers, I pivoted, right? And so I went from Monday through Friday, every day at 6 a.m. Eastern Time, to Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And my numbers still weren't where I wanted them to be. So then I took it to podcasting, right? I would go live and then check the numbers. I would record my podcast and check the numbers, right? I would check to see how many people watched when I was going live, how many people listened, how many views did I get, you know, once I started going on audio, I was doing audio only because I went from going live every day to going live 3 days a week to the podcast, just audio, right? So I was checking all of those numbers. And if those numbers wasn't what I thought they should have been, I would get sad. I would be sad. I would be sad, right? Because I would start thinking, nobody's listening to me. Why am I doing this? I'm putting in all this work into this conversation, right? I'm researching, I'm planning, I'm doing all the things, but still nobody's listening. And eventually I had to change the way I looked at it, right? So this was disturbing my peace, right? It was disturbing my peace because all my thought process was going into why isn't anyone listening, right? Why isn't anyone listening? And eventually I had to change the way I looked at it. I realized something. If I touched one person, my job is done. And I say that all the time. I say that, I believe that, and I pray that if one person is listening, my job is done. One person. All I need is one person, right? Because if one person hears a cocoa conversation and says, Princess, I needed that today, then what I created mattered. You know, if something I said resonates with one person and helps them think differently, encourages them, and makes them laugh or helps them through their day, then I did my job. I did my job, right? Would I love thousands of people to listen? Absolutely. Of course. I would love for thousands of people to listen or watch. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you I don't want my podcast to grow just because I think differently now, right? But I can't allow my numbers to determine whether I believe what I'm doing has value, because what I'm doing does have value. Because the minute I give those numbers that kind of power, I've given them access to my peace, right? I've given them access to my peace. So I no longer give the numbers power. I no longer give the numbers power. And that's exactly what we're talking about today. Sometimes protecting your peace means recognizing what you've given too much power to, right? Now, there's one more thing we need to address before we leave this part of the conversation, right? One more thing. Protecting your peace does not mean avoiding every uncomfortable conversation. Okay? That's not what that means. I think sometimes we hear protect your peace and interpret it as I'm not dealing with that, I'm not talking about that, and I'm staying away from anything uncomfortable. But avoidance and peace are not necessarily the same thing. Avoidance and peace are not necessarily the same thing. Sometimes the very thing disturbing your peace is the conversation you keep refusing to have. The very thing that you're running from is what's disturbing your peace. You know? You know there's an issue. They know it's an issue. Everybody in the room knows there's an issue. And then there's an elephant sitting right in the middle of the room, and everybody is walking around there pretending they don't see it. Everybody, So have the conversation, address the elephant in the room, say what needs to be said respectfully, and if a boundary needs to be established, establish it. Because sometimes protecting your peace means saying, we need to talk. We need to talk about this because I don't want to keep carrying it. Right? It's heavy. It's heavy. Right? So you may not be able to control how the other person responds. Right? And you may not get the apology you wanted if that's what you're looking for. Right? And you may not even reach the agreement you hope for after the talk. But you can Be clear about what you will accept, what you won't accept, and how you're going to move forward. And that's protection too, right? So as we move into the next part of our Coco conversation, just remember, protecting your peace isn't about building a wall around your life. It's about becoming more intentional about what gets your attention, what gets your energy, what gets your participation, and what gets access to you. Because you work too hard to create the peace in your life to hand it over to every person, every problem, every notification, every headline, or a number on a screen that comes along. Okay? Protect it. Protect it. Okay? Now that we've talked about protecting it, let's move into the second part of our Coco conversation. Deepen it. Deepen it. Like, deepen it, right? Because once you start protecting your peace, you have to decide what you're going to do with the space that the protection has created, right? And and I don't think the answer is always go find something new, right? Sometimes the answer is just invest more deeply in the life you've already built, right? Think about what we've been over these last few weeks, right? Think about that, what we've discussed over the last few weeks, right? So we started with steady steps, right? We're going to keep going when the motivation isn't there, right? We're going to keep going. Then we moved into systems over willpower, building something that supports you and the life that you're building, right? Then we talked about living in the space you created by enjoying what you built. And now we're rooted and reaching. We're rooted and reaching. So we've already talked about protecting it. Now it's time to deepen it, right? Now we live in a culture that's constantly asking us what's next. What's next? What's the next goal? What's the next project? The next accomplishment? You know? What's the next thing you're going to buy? What's the next place you're going? And what's the next level? Frankly, nothing's wrong with wanting more for yourself. There's nothing wrong with having goals, dreams, or the things you still want to accomplish. But I think sometimes we're so busy looking for the next thing that we don't invest enough in the things we've already said were important. Right? We skip over that because we're looking for the next thing. Sometimes growth isn't about adding something new. Sometimes growth is going deeper. Now, what do I mean when I say that? Think about a tree. Think about a tree. Okay? We notice what's happening above ground, right? We don't notice anything else but what's happening above ground when it comes to a tree, right? We see the branches getting longer. We see the leaves. We see the fruit. That's the visible growth. But there's also growth happening underneath the surface. The roots are getting deeper. Nobody is standing around applauding the roots. Like, that just doesn't happen. They're looking at the tree and the bounty of the tree, right? Because nobody sees the roots. But those roots are what allow the tree to stand when the wind starts blowing. Like the foundation, right? And I think our lives work the same way. Some of the most important growth, right, in your life may never be something anybody else can see, right? But we're going to still strengthen what matters, right? Because maybe this season isn't asking you to add more. Maybe it's asking you to strengthen what you already have. Right? Have you ever thought about that? It's not asking you to add more to your life. It's just asking you to strengthen what you already have. Now, look at your routines. You don't necessarily need a brand new routine every month, right? Maybe you need to become more consistent with the routine that's already working, right? Look at your relationships. When was the last time you really sat down and talked to the people that you love? Not a quick text. I hate texts. I hate texts. I hate them. You know? Not liking their Facebook posts, not sending them a reel that you've seen that you liked or that you think they may like or you think that resonates with them. I mean, really connecting. Really connecting. Maybe deepening your roots means calling somebody, having dinner together, listening, being present, making memories with people who matter to you. What about your values? Are you actually living according to the things you say are important to you? Because it's easy to say what we value. The question is whether our time and choices reflect those values. Another one, faith. Maybe you don't need some dramatic spiritual experience. Maybe deepening your roots means spending a little more quiet time with God, praying, reflecting, reading the Bible, being grateful, and allowing your faith to become something that grounds you, not just something you reach for when life gets difficult. Because a lot of people, believe it or not, only pray when life gets difficult. You know? Look at your home. Look at your home that you built. Home doesn't have to be perfect, but does it feel like the place where you can exhale, right? A couple of months ago, I felt like my bedroom was, I shared my bedroom, but it felt like it was dark and gloomy. And so I said, I've always loved pink and purple. Let's incorporate some of those colors that I've always loved and I always used. Let's incorporate them in my bedroom, right? It's not going to make it feminine, but it's just going to bring some light and some airiness. And it did. It did just that, right? I was really pleased with the update that I did, right? Um, so deepening your roots in your homes means creating space that feels comfortable, peaceful, reflective of the life you're trying to live, right? Now look at your health, right? Not from a punishment standpoint, but not because you're chasing some perfect number or whatever. But because the body, right? That body is your temple and it's carrying you through the life you're building. So you want to you want to deepen your thoughts when it surrounds your health. You know, because what does it need from you? Maybe it's just movement, maybe it's rest, better food choices, all of the things, right? Look at your creativity. Are you still creating because you enjoy it? Or has everything become performance? Like everything today is so performative to me, but I digress. You know, sometimes you need to return to the thing that made you love creating in the first place. So tap into your creativity. We all have it, right? And look at your community. Are you connected? Are you participating? Are you building relationships outside of your home? Are you creating spaces where people feel welcome? Right? Because community doesn't deepen simply because we're members of the same group. Community deepens when we show up for one another. Okay? Here's what I really want us to understand. Depth can be growth too, right? The pits and the depths of your soul. Depth can be growth too. You don't always need another branch. Sometimes you need stronger roots, and stronger roots don't necessarily make your life look bigger from the outside, right? They make your life stronger in the inside, and that's the base sustain. Oh my God, I can't talk. That's sustainability. When you can make your life stronger on the inside and not just on the outside. Because if all we're doing is expanding, adding more responsibilities, more commitments, more goals, and all of the things, eventually we're going to have this big, beautiful tree with shallow roots, right? And we don't want that. And when the storm comes, we don't want we don't want to have anything holding us steady. When the storm comes, we won't have anything holding us steady. So maybe instead of asking ourselves, what else can I add? We start asking what deserves to go deeper, you know? And maybe it's your relationships, your friendships, your faith, your commitment, and your creative work. Like maybe you need to deepen your relationship with yourself. You may need to start there. But just learn what you enjoy, learn what you need, learn what drains you, and learn what restores you, which is very important. Because the more rooted you become in who you are and what matters to you, the less easily everything around you can pull away from it, if that makes sense. So here's our second Coco question. Instead of asking what I need to add to my life, what already exists that deserves more of my attention? Instead of asking what I need to add to my life, what already exists that deserves more of your attention? And sit with that for a minute. I'm all about reflection because the answer might not require you to buy anything. It might not require you to start anything. It might not require another planner, vision, challenge, or goal, or any of those things, right? It may simply require you to look at something that's already a part of your life and say, I want to take better care of this. And that's what deepening your roots are all about, right? That's investing in the life that you built. And that's how we begin creating something that doesn't just look good for the season, but has the strength to last, right? So we've learned to protect it, and now we've learned to deepen it, right? Now let's talk about the final piece. Share it. And so what do I mean by share it, right? I'm not asking you to spend no money, but eventually this journey has to move beyond ourselves, right? So all this work we putting in, we got to move that, you know? We got to eventually move it beyond ourselves because we've spent time building our lives. We created systems that support us. We've learned how to enjoy what we've built, right? We've protected our peace. We've deepened our roots. But somewhere along the line, we also have to ask, what can I contribute forward? Because if you've lived long enough, you've learned something, right? You definitely have experienced some things. You've overcome some things. You've made mistakes, trust, but you've also figured things out. And you know what works for you and what absolutely does not work for you. And all of those things have given you something valuable. What do you think that is? What do you think that is? It's wisdom. It's wisdom, right? So then the question becomes, what are you going to do with the wisdom that you have? What are you going to do with it, right? What can you pass forward? Contribution doesn't have to mean writing a big check. It doesn't require to start a nonprofit organization. None of that. You don't have to be a motivational speaker. No, that is not what I'm saying here. Sometimes contribution is much quieter than that, right? Maybe you can mentor someone who's just starting out in an area where you already have experience, right? Encouragement. You can encourage someone who's going through something that you've already gone through. You could share your knowledge with someone instead of keeping everything you've learned to yourself. Like, don't be a gatekeeper. Um, Support a family member who's trying to accomplish something, you know? Volunteer. Maybe you can create something that makes someone else's life easier, you know? Maybe you simply say, come on, I'll show you what I've learned, right? That's it. Come on, I'll show you what I've learned. I love that kind of contribution because you're not saying do everything exactly the way I did. You're actually saying to them, I've already walked down this road. Let me show you where some of those potholes are. Right? Simple. Because they still have to walk their own journey. But maybe because you've shared what you've learned, their journey becomes just a tad bit easier because your experience does have value. It has value. And sometimes we underestimate what we have to offer because what we know feels ordinary to us, right? You've been doing something for years, so you think everybody knows that? No, they don't. Mm. Somebody is standing at the beginning of something you've been doing for 10, 20, maybe 30 years who could take the experience and the knowledge that you give them and use it, right? Um, Something that feels basic to you could be exactly what someone else needs to learn. So your experience has value, your story has value, even your mistakes have value if you're willing to share what the mistakes have taught you. I'm just saying. So sometimes contribution isn't about giving somebody the answer, right? Sometimes it's simply being willing to say, here's what here's what happened to me. Here's what I've learned. And maybe something in my experience can help you. You can approach it like that because that's contributing forward, right? And when I think about this question myself, I realize that this is part of what I do every day. What I do every day, right? I contribute forward through cup of cocoa and chat, right? I do it through my podcast. I do it through my daily inspiration and motivation. I love when I see feedback. I love when I see comments when people are like, "Thanks for sharing this." And like I said, if it's only one person, my job is done. In my Facebook groups, I share tips and strategies. Um, I share scriptures and reflections, right? Um, Sometimes I share the things that I researched. Sometimes I share the things that I've learned. Sometimes I share the things that I lived, right? I don't know who's going to hear it. I don't know always who needs it. But as we talked about earlier, I had to stop allowing numbers to determine whether I believed my contribution mattered because somebody may never comment. They may never hit the like button. They may never follow me or tell me that I helped them. But that doesn't mean I didn't help them. And that's the way I look at it. It doesn't mean I didn't help them. And that's another reason I had to stop measuring the value of what I contribute only by the response I could see, because I know my responsibility is to share what I have to give, right? And what somebody does with it belongs solely to them, right? And that's not for me to worry about, right? Now, here's where we have to connect, share it back to protect it, right? First was protect it, deepen it, and now we're talking about sharing it. So we're going to connect that back to protect it because contribution needs boundaries. It needs boundaries, okay? I want you to hear this. You don't have to empty yourself to prove that you're generous. You don't have to be available to everybody. You don't have to solve everybody's problems. Mm-mm. You don't have to give money you cannot afford to give. That's not what contribution is all about. You don't have to give your time. And a couple of things. Couple of more things. You don't have to sacrifice your well-being every time somebody needs something, right? And certainly you don't have to feel guilty because sometimes the answer is simply, I can't do that right now. So that's okay, right? Because remember, we're talking about sustainability. So if the way you're helping everybody else continuously leaves you exhausted, resentful, financially strained, emotional depleted, or unable to take care of yourself, then eventually you won't have anything left to contribute. So I don't want that, right? Contribution should come from what you can sustainably give, whether it's money, time, your experiences, whatever. Make sure it's something that you can sustainably give, you know, because everybody don't, you know, everybody can't give 5 hours, but I can give 30, you know. Maybe you can't give money, but you can give information. Maybe you can't fix the situation, but you can lend an listening ear, you know? And you definitely can't you can't take somebody by the hand and walk them through their entire journey with them, but you can point them in the right direction. Give from what you have, not from what you have to destroy yourself to provide. Okay? And here's something else I've learned about paying it forward. When you contribute something good, you can't always expect it to come back from the same person. So if you're given to receive, don't give. Don't give. Because when you contribute something good, you can't always expect it to come back, right? Sometimes we get disappointed because we helped somebody, supported somebody, encouraged somebody, and when we needed something, they weren't there. But paying it forward isn't always an exchange because you can give to someone and somebody else can give to you, right? It's not, I did this for you, so now you owe me. Mm-mm. You can pour into one person somewhere else along your journey. Somebody's going to pour into you. Someone completely different will pour into you. That's why I think contribution works best when it comes from a genuine place rather than keeping score. Okay? So you do what you are able to do, you share what you're able to share, and then keep it moving forward. Just keep it moving forward. So here's our final Coco conversation question. What do I have now in terms of wisdom, experience, time, resources, encouragement that could make someone else's journey a little easier? Don't dismiss the small things, right? Because they matter too when you answer this question, right? Maybe you know how to do something that someone else is struggling with, you know? Maybe you have a connection that could open a door for someone. You never know. You never know, right? Listen to people, right? Share it. Share it. Because maybe you have a story that someone needs to hear. Or maybe you simply have the ability to tell somebody, you can do this. Keep going, which is encouragement, and it goes a long way. And that is a form of contribution, right? It doesn't always have to be monetary. Um, and when enough of us begin contributing forward, something beautiful happens. The wisdom doesn't stop with you or us. The encouragement doesn't stop. The knowledge, the opportunities doesn't stop with us because we reach back, we reach across, and we reach forward. And now the name of this week's theme makes even more sense when you hear that our theme for the week is rooted and reaching. right? Because we become rooted enough to stand firmly in the life we've built while still reaching for enough to make someone else's journey a little better, right? That same thing when you climbing that ladder, reach down and grab somebody else. Reach down and grab somebody else up with you, right? So protect what you've built, deepen what matters, and when you have something to give, share it. Just share it. But not until you're empty, not at at the expense of your peace, but from a place of wisdom, intention, and abundance. Because sometimes the greatest evidence that we've grown isn't simply what we've built for ourselves. It's what we're able to pass forward. Okay? So in closing, as we come to the end of today's Cocoa Conversation, I want to leave you with this thought. The goal isn't just to build a good life. It's to build a life you can sustain, a life that you can stay rooted in, a life that leaves something good behind. We spent a lot of time talking about building. We talked about taking steady steps and continuing even when the excitement wears off. We talked about creating systems that support us instead of depending on willpower alone, right? We've talked about living in space, in the space that we've created, slowing down, being present, and actually enjoying the life we're working so hard to build. And today we've taken that journey one step forward with protecting it, deepening it, and sharing it, and finally sharing it. Okay. So take what you've learned, right? Take what you've learned. Because when you protect it, now I want you to be selective about what it gets your attention and your energy and your participation. Deepening it, stop believing that growth always means adding something new. Invest in what already matters, okay? And when you share it, take what you've learned, what you experienced, and what you survived, okay? But not until you're empty, not at the expense of your own well being, but in the way that says, I've learned something along the way, and maybe what I've learned can make your journey a little easier. And that's what it means to be rooted and reaching. Rooted enough to protect the life you're building, rooted enough to and deepen the things that matter, and secure enough in those roots that you can reach beyond yourself and leave something good behind. So this week, I want you to ask yourself 3 simple questions. What do I need to protect? What do I need to deepen? And what I can share. Okay? And you don't have to answer all 3 today. Just sit with them all through the week. You got all this week to think about and see where they take you. Okay? So, until next time, continue to protect your peace, deepen your roots, and contribute forward. Okay? Peace, peace, blessings. I love you guys, and I mean it.